the ebb and flow, the sine wave of women's involvement at the highest levels, and then when there was a dearth of women at the highest levels.
Steven Spielberg has never filmed beauty as ornament. In his cinema, it carries weight, sometimes grace, sometimes defiance, sometimes danger. There is no official ranking he ever published. But across decades of storytelling, 7 women stand out in the way his camera sees them. Number 1. Audrey Hepburn. There is a kind of beauty that does not demand attention. It simply steadies the room. In Always, the presence on screen feels timeless, almost celestial, framed with restraint rather than spectacle. The performance carries quiet authority, suggesting that elegance is not decoration but composure, held gently even in moments of emotional farewell. When Audrey Hepburn steps into Spielberg's frame, the film subtly shifts. He does not introduce her with spectacle or dramatic flourish. Instead, he allows her stillness to guide the emotional rhythm. By the time they collaborated on Always, Hepburn already symbolized classic Hollywood grace, yet Spielberg films her not as a relic of the past, but as a living embodiment of it.
Hello, Pete.
Her entrance carries a calm authority that steadies the narrative. Even surrounded by longing and unresolved emotion, she remains composed. Spielberg once said she carried grace the way other actors carry dialogue. That is what Spielberg always said. The power of the performance lies in restraint. Spielberg avoids excessive close-ups or sentimental cues. He trusts Hepburn's presence to fill the silence. In a story centered on love and loss, her serenity offers balance, reminding the audience that beauty can exist without urgency, without spectacle, and without noise. Later, Spielberg reflected that Audrey did not need embellishment. The camera only had to be patient. That is what Spielberg always said. That patience becomes the defining note of her appearance. Audrey Hepburn is not filmed as spectacle, nor as distant legend. She is filmed as presence, calm, luminous, unwavering. And in Spielberg's cinema, presence like that does not simply appear, it endures, quietly shaping the emotional memory of the film long after it ends. Number 2. Kate Capshaw. Some beauty thrives in chaos. In Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, glamour collides with danger, spotlights against firelight, sequins against ancient ritual. The camera follows movement, panic, and wit in equal measure. Instead of diminishing under pressure, the presence intensifies, turning vulnerability into something unexpectedly electric. When Kate Capshaw appears as Willie Scott, Spielberg makes a deliberate choice. He does not tone her down to match the grit of the adventure. He heightens her theatricality. The opening sequence frames her in feathers and gold, commanding a Shanghai nightclub with bravado before the world collapses around her. Beauty here is not calm. It is kinetic, restless, unpredictable, and defiantly alive in every exaggerated gesture. Within minutes, glamour gives way to peril. Capshaw's character is thrust into jungles, underground temples, and rituals that feel almost mythic in their darkness. Instead of shrinking from the chaos, she reacts to it loudly, emotionally, honestly. Spielberg once said, "Kate embraced the extremes. She understood that spectacle needs contrast." That is what Spielberg always said. That contrast becomes the engine of her presence. Her fear is not muted. It is expressive, even comedic at times, allowing tension to breathe. The audience feels danger through her reactions. She becomes the emotional barometer of the adventure, translating spectacle into something immediate and human. Later, Spielberg reflected that she brought glamour into places it did not belong, and that made the story unpredictable. That is what Spielberg always said. Kate Capshaw's beauty in the film is inseparable from motion. It survives dust, danger, and darkness. In Spielberg's world, chaos does not erase radiance. It reveals how fiercely it can shine. Number 3. Drew Barrymore. Occasionally, beauty arrives as pure openness. In E.T., the camera lingers on expressions that feel unfiltered and immediate, capturing sincerity before self-awareness sets in. What appears on screen is not polish but authenticity, a childlike radiance that feels spontaneous, fragile, and impossibly present in every glance. When Drew Barrymore steps into Spielberg's suburban fairy tale, she is not treated like a child star delivering lines. She is treated like a child discovering something extraordinary. Spielberg famously encouraged improvisation on set, allowing her imagination to guide the rhythm of her scenes. The result feels less like performance and more like lived experience unfolding in real time, guided by instinct rather than calculation. The simplicity of that moment carries enormous weight. Barrymore's wide-eyed curiosity becomes the emotional entry point into the story's wonder. Spielberg once said, "Drew believed in E.T. completely, and that belief made everyone else believe too." That is what Spielberg always said. Her presence softens the science fiction. Amid government agents and glowing spaceships, it is her sincerity that anchors the fantasy. Spielberg keeps the camera low, often at her eye level, reinforcing the perspective of a child who sees magic not as spectacle, but as possibility. Even in scenes of tension, Barrymore's vulnerability never feels calculated. Years later, Spielberg reflected that she trusted the moment without questioning it, and that honesty cannot be directed. That is what Spielberg always said. Drew Barrymore's beauty in E.T. is inseparable from that trust. It is the courage to remain open, to react without armor. In Spielberg's cinema, that kind of openness does not fade with time. It becomes part of the film's enduring heartbeat, echoing long after the final farewell. Number 4. Laura Dern. Strength can be beautiful when it thinks before it reacts. In Jurassic Park, intelligence. Anchor spectacle, grounding towering dinosaurs in human focus. The frame returns again and again to steady eyes and composed resolve. Beauty here is competence, measured, analytical, and unwavering even as the impossible unfolds. When Laura Dern steps into the role of Ellie Sattler, Spielberg positions her not as an accessory to adventure, but as its moral and intellectual center. Surrounded by groundbreaking visual effects and prehistoric scale, her performance keeps the story human. She's a scientist first, curious, rational, observant. And Spielberg makes sure the camera respects that authority, never diminishing her expertise for spectacle or reducing her to background reaction. That quiet moment in the field defines her presence. While others react with awe or fear, Ellie studies, questions, processes. Spielberg once said, "Laura gave the spectacle a conscience." That is what Spielberg always said. As chaos erupts across the island, her composure sharpens. She runs toward Baz. Danger not for heroics, but because someone must restore order. Spielberg frames her determination in tight close-ups, rain streaking across her face, resolve never breaking. The dinosaurs may command the skyline, but her steadiness commands the narrative and shapes its emotional stakes in crucial moments of escalating peril. Later, Spielberg reflected that she grounded the impossible in something truthful. That is what Spielberg always said. Laura Dern's beauty in Jurassic Park is inseparable from intellect. It is found in analysis, in bravery shaped by thought rather than impulse. In Spielberg's world, spectacle may dominate the screen, but it is competence, courage, and clarity that endure long after the roar fades into silence, leaving conviction in its wake. Number 5. Whoopi Goldberg. True beauty sometimes reveals itself through endurance. In The Color Purple, the camera studies resilience rather than glamour, allowing emotion to shape the frame. What emerges is not ornament, but depth, a presence defined by survival, vulnerability, and a refusal to disappear, even when the world tries to silence it. When Whoopi Goldberg takes on the role of Celie, Spielberg shifts his usual visual rhythm. The film is expansive in scope, yet the most powerful moments arrive in stillness, when the camera rests on her face and allows feeling to surface without interruption. Goldberg's performance is internal, measured, and profoundly human, resisting melodrama in favor of lived truth and emotional authenticity that feels deeply earned. That restraint becomes the film's emotional architecture. Goldberg does not plead for sympathy. She embodies quiet endurance, carrying years of pain and posture alone. Spielberg once said, "Whoopi brought truth into every frame, and truth does not need decoration." That is what Spielberg always said. As the story unfolds, Seeley's transformation is gradual, almost imperceptible at first. The beauty Spielberg captures is, not in spectacle but in survival. Each small act of defiance, each reclaimed breath, each flicker of self-worth slowly reignited. The camera returns repeatedly to her eyes, searching not for glamour, but for strength rediscovered and identity slowly reclaimed from silence. Later, Spielberg reflected that her strength was never loud, but it was unbreakable. That is what Spielberg always said. Whoopi Goldberg's beauty in The Color Purple is inseparable from resilience. It is carved from hardship and illuminated by dignity. In Spielberg's cinema, endurance is not just survival. It is transformation, quiet, powerful, and impossible to erase, leaving an imprint far deeper than surface radiance ever could, echoing long after the credits roll. Number 6. Embeth Davidtz. In the darkest stories, beauty can feel like fragile light. Schindler's List frames dignity in small gestures and restrained emotion. Within the weight of history, the presence on screen becomes a reminder that humanity persists. It is subtle, composed, and quietly courageous. When Embeth Davidtz appears as Helen Hirsch, Spielberg narrows the focus of an epic narrative into intimate tension. Surrounded by brutality and moral collapse, her performance is built on stillness. She does not dominate scenes with volume. She survives them with control. Spielberg's camera often lingers just long enough to capture the unspoken fear behind composed restraint, allowing silence to speak louder than dialogue ever could. In those moments, the danger is psychological as much as physical. Davidtz communicates vulnerability without surrendering dignity. A flicker in her eyes, a measured breath, a pause before responding. Each detail deepens the tension. Spielberg once said, "Embeth understood that strength could exist in silence." That is what Spielberg always said. The film's stark black and white imagery heightens every glance and hesitation. Against that severe palette, her presence feels almost luminous, not because it is glamorous, but because it is human. She represents the quiet resistance of simply enduring, of holding on to identity when everything conspires to erase it. Later, Spielberg reflected that she carried the moral weight of her scenes without ever raising her voice. That is what Spielberg always said. Embeth Davidtz's beauty in Schindler's List is inseparable from restraint. It is found in posture, in measured breath, in courage that does not announce itself. In Spielberg's cinema, even the faintest light can cut through overwhelming darkness, reminding audiences that dignity itself can be a form of defiance. Number 7. Rachel Zegler. Sometimes beauty feels like a story being reborn. In West Side Story, youthful conviction and vulnerability merge within sweeping musical frames. The camera does not rush to mythologize. It observes discovery, hesitation, and hope. What unfolds feels immediate and timeless at once, breathing new life into a familiar tragedy. When Rachel Zegler steps into the role of Maria, Spielberg makes a decisive choice. He does not frame her as an untouchable icon from the start. Instead, he introduces her as a young woman discovering love in real time. The camera lingers on uncertainty as much as joy, allowing vulnerability to define the rhythm of her performance and shaping the emotional pulse of each scene she inhabits with remarkable sincerity. Ziegler's voice carries both innocence and resolve. Spielberg once said, "Rachel brought honesty to every note, and honesty makes beauty unforgettable." That is what Spielberg always said. The grandeur of the production, sweeping choreography, saturated color, elaborate set pieces could easily overwhelm a newcomer. Yet Zegler remains the emotional center. Spielberg often frames her in intimate close-ups amid spectacle, isolating her reactions so the audience feels the personal stakes beneath the musical scale and the fragile hope beneath the romance, even when the world around her fractures. Later, Spielberg reflected that she understood that Maria's strength lies in her heart, not just her voice. That is what Spielberg always said. Rachel Zegler's beauty in West Side Story is inseparable from conviction. It lives in hesitation before a kiss, in tears held back, in hope that refuses to dim even as tragedy approaches. In Spielberg's hands, she is not simply reviving a classic. She is reminding audiences that timeless stories survive because new faces dare to believe in them, fully and fearlessly, against impossible odds. Across decades of filmmaking, Steven Spielberg has never treated beauty as something ornamental. In his world, it carries meaning. It steadies chaos, softens spectacle, survives hardship, and dares to hope when stories turn dark. From quiet grace to fearless vulnerability, each woman shaped not just a frame, but the emotional memory of a film. What makes these performances endure is not perfection, it is presence. The ability to hold the camera without forcing it, to let silence speak, to trust that authenticity will outlast glamour. These portrayals remind us that cinema is not built on appearances alone, but on humanity revealed under pressure. Because in the end, Spielberg's lens does not chase beauty. It reveals it, and reminds us what we value most when the lights go down. Which performance stayed with you the most? Share your thoughts below, and if you enjoy cinematic deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe for more stories behind the screen.